He, a solitary tycoon, haunted by the regret of losing his childhood friend. She, Eduarda, this friend, now homeless. At a charity gala, Arthur recognizes her, despondent. The image breaks his heart. Driven by love and redemption, he rescues her. He takes her to a hospital, cares for her, and declares he will never abandon her again, offering her a home and all the happiness the world has stolen from her. Prepare for a twist where society and the past will try to destroy the tycoon's love for the former homeless woman. But the strength of this love and her dignity can heal all wounds. Watch this story until the end. You will be amazed by this story. If you like stories of love, romance, subscribe to this channel, leave your comment. We post videos like this every day. Continuing. The cold July winds sliced through Eleanor Campos's skin like invisible razors. She pulled the threadbare coat tighter around her body, trying to shield herself from the drizzle that began to fall on the streets of Chicago. At 38 years old, her face still bore traces of the beauty she once possessed, but now it was marked by the harshness of 3 years living on the streets. Her brown eyes, once bright, looked like frosted glass, reflecting only the weariness of someone who had lost everything. Eleanor adjusted the small piece of cardboard that served as her seat on the park bench and watched the city move. Hurried executives passed her by as if she were invisible, a few tossing coins into her plastic cup without even looking in her direction. She didn't beg with words. Her dignity still resisted that, but necessity forced her to accept the silent charity of passers-by. Her fingers trembled not only from the cold, but from the memory of what she had been. With a degree in education, she had worked for years as a teacher until her mother's illness consumed all her savings. Then came unemployment, the abandonment of her fiancé, who couldn't bear to see her fail, and finally the loss of her apartment. A succession of blows that knocked her down like dominoes in a row. Across town, Arthur Sterling adjusted his Italian silk tie as he watched Chicago through the windows of the 30th floor of his office. At 40 years old, he owned a tech empire valued at billions of dollars. His company developed apps that connected millions of people. A cruel irony for someone who felt profoundly isolated. Arthur ran his hand through his dark hair, already showing some silver strands at his temples. His assistant had cancelled another social gathering. He simply couldn't feign interest in the empty conversations of the Chicago elite. Success had given him everything: mansions, cars, worldwide recognition. But it couldn't fill the void he had carried since childhood, especially when he thought of Eleanor. They had been inseparable from 7 to 15 years old when his family moved to London. Arthur never forgot the bright-eyed girl who shared with him the dreams of changing the world. She wanted to be a teacher and save children. He dreamed of creating technologies that helped people. For years he had tried to find her, but the leads always led to dead ends. That rainy afternoon, Arthur decided to do something different. He had read about a social project in the city center, a shelter that offered meals to people experiencing homelessness. His foundation donated money to various causes, but he never visited personally. Maybe it was time to see firsthand where his money was being invested. He put on casual clothes and drove his most discreet car, a black BMW. He wanted to go unnoticed, to observe without being recognized. The traffic was heavy, and when he finally arrived downtown, the rain had intensified. He parked a few blocks away from the shelter and decided to walk. That's when he saw her. Eleanor was sitting on the park bench in front of the shelter, trying to protect herself from the rain with an old newspaper over her head. Even from afar, even changed, even destroyed by life, there was something in that profile that made Arthur's heart race. The way she held her spine erect despite everything, the delicate way she held the plastic cup, an unconsciously elegant gesture that time had not erased. He approached slowly, his heart beating erratically. It couldn't be her. Not Eleanor. Not like this. When he got closer, he saw the small scar on her chin, the same one she had gotten at 10 years old when she fell off her bike while trying to escape the school bullies. His legs weakened. "Excuse me," he said, his voice hoarse. "Would you like a coffee?" There's a diner just around the corner. Eleanor looked up, and for a moment time stood still. There was something familiar in that voice, in those blue eyes that watched her with a strange intensity. But life on the streets had taught her distrust. "No need," she murmured, turning her gaze back to the ground. Arthur felt like he had been punched in the stomach. It was her, his Eleanor, the girl who had shared stolen cookies from the kitchen with him, who had consoled him when his parents argued, who had promised that they would be friends forever. And now she was there, lost, destroyed, alone. The rain continued to fall, washing away the tears that began to run silently down Arthur's face as he stood still, watching the woman who had been his greatest friend shrink under the storm, oblivious to the fact that her salvation was only 6 feet away. Arthur couldn't walk away. He stood under the awning of a store, watching Eleanor fight against the rain that now fell harder. Each drop that wet her brown hair was like a blow to his chest. He had spent 25 years imagining reunions, but never like this. Never with her reduced to that condition. He took a deep breath and approached again, this time taking off his own coat. "Please," he said, extending the garment to her. "You'll get sick in this rain." Eleanor looked at the expensive coat, then at the man in front of her. He was tall, well-dressed even in casual clothes, and there was something in his eyes that disturbed her. A kindness that didn't seem false, unlike the looks of pity or disgust she was used to receiving. "I can't accept it," she murmured. "You'll ruin it." "I don't care about the coat." Arthur knelt beside the bench, getting eye level with her. "I care about you." The words came out before he could filter them, loaded with an intimacy that didn't make sense for a stranger. Eleanor felt her heart race. There was something in that voice. "You?" she began, studying his face more closely. The blue eyes, the way he tilted his head slightly when he spoke, a gesture that made her remember. "No, it can't be." Arthur felt the air leave his lungs. "Eleanor," he whispered like a prayer. She recoiled as if she'd been slapped. "How do you know my name?" "Because it's me, Arthur. Arthur Sterling." He extended his hand slowly, as if approaching a wounded animal. "Remember the promise we made in the tree in your grandma's backyard? That we would be friends forever?" Eleanor's eyes filled with tears. The memory came like an avalanche. The blonde boy with blue eyes who had been her best friend, her first crush, her partner in crime. The same one who had left for London, leaving her heartbroken at 15. "Arthur," she whispered, and the name came out like a moan of pain. "No, you can't see me like this." Instinctively, she tried to get up and run, but her legs gave way. She had eaten only a piece of bread in the morning, and the emotion of recognition was like a final blow to her already shaken resistance. Arthur held her by the arms, preventing her from falling. "Hey, easy. You're not going anywhere now." His voice was choked. "Let me take you to get something to eat, warm you up." "No!" Eleanor wrenched herself away from him with a strength she didn't know she still possessed. "You don't understand. Look at me. Look what I've become." Arthur looked. He saw the woman who was too thin, the threadbare clothes, the dirt under her fingernails. But he also saw the same brown eyes that had consoled him when his father yelled, the same delicate way of moving her hands, the same stubbornness in her upturned chin. "I see you," he said simply. "The same girl who taught me to be brave." "That girl died," Eleanor replied bitterly. "What's left is this, a beggar, Arthur. A failure who lost everything." The rain had stopped, but the cold wind continued to be sharp. Arthur took off his coat and, ignoring her protests, placed it over her shoulders. The thin fabric of the suit he wore underneath soon got wet, but he didn't care. "Come with me," he pleaded. "Just a hot meal. As friends." "Friends?" Eleanor laughed in despair. "You're Arthur Sterling. I read about you in the magazines I scavenged from the trash. Millionaire, businessman of the year, philanthropist. And I'm this, your Eleanor Campos, the smartest girl in our class. The one who dreamed of saving the world one child at a time." Arthur stood up, extending his hand to her. "And I'm still the boy who cried when I had to go home because my parents were fighting." For a moment, Eleanor almost accepted the outstretched hand. She almost allowed nostalgia to overcome shame. But then she saw the reflection of both of them in the store window. Him impeccable, even wet, radiating power and success. Her destroyed, wearing his coat as a mockery of dignity. "I can't," she whispered, taking off the coat and returning it to him. "You have a life, a reputation. Imagine if someone sees you with me." Imagine the headlines. Arthur took the coat, but continued holding one of the ends, while she held the other, creating a tenuous physical connection between them. "I don't care about headlines. You should care." Eleanor let go of the coat. "Go, Arthur. Go back to your world. Pretend you never saw me." She got up and began to walk away, but Arthur caught up to her. "Eleanor, wait. At least tell me where I can find you." "What for?" She turned and he saw that she was crying. "So you can feel better about yourself? So your foundation can have a new cause? I'm not your charity case." The words were like daggers, but Arthur understood the pain behind them. "It's not about charity. It's about..." "About what?" she challenged. "About me having thought about you every day for the last 25 years, he confessed, his voice breaking. "About me having looked for you in every city I visited, in every event I went to. About you having been the only person who truly knew me." Eleanor felt the ground slip from under her feet. The sincerity in his voice was undeniable, but the reality was too cruel. "I sleep in a doorway 6 blocks from here," she said finally, her voice almost inaudible. "Near the subway station." "But Arthur, don't come looking for me, please." She walked away quickly, disappearing among the passers-by. Arthur stood still, holding the coat still warm from her body heat, feeling as if he had found and lost his heart again in the space of a conversation. But as he walked back to the car, an iron determination settled in his chest. He had found Eleanor. After 25 years, she was there, just 6 blocks away. And no matter what she said, no matter the obstacles between them, he wouldn't lose her again. That night, Arthur cancelled all appointments and spent hours researching the situation of homelessness in Chicago, about shelters, about social reintegration programs. When he finally went to sleep, he already had a plan formed in his mind. The next morning, Eleanor woke up in the cold doorway and found a backpack next to her. Inside were new clothes of the right size, hygiene products, food, and a note with only one sentence. "A friend taught me that we should never give up on each other." As Eleanor stared at the backpack for long minutes before touching it. It was as if the object was radioactive, capable of contaminating what little remained of her pride. But the cold of the early morning had been especially cruel, and when she opened the zipper and saw the clean clothes, the soap that smelled of lavender, the cookie packets, her eyes filled with tears. She used the public restroom at the bus terminal to clean herself and change clothes. When she looked in the mirror, for a brief moment she glimpsed the woman she had been. The simple but good quality blouse highlighted her eyes. The jeans fit well on her thin body. It was like wearing a costume of normalcy. She returned to her bench in the park with contradictory feelings. Part of her was furious with Arthur for ignoring her request. Another part, a part she was trying to stifle, felt warmed for the first time in months. She didn't have to wait long to see him appear. Arthur arrived around 10 in the morning, carrying 2 cups of coffee and a bag of donuts. He wore jeans and a simple shirt, trying to seem less intimidating than the day before. But it was impossible to disguise the aura of power that emanated from him. "I thought you might be hungry," he said, sitting next to her on the bench without asking permission. Eleanor accepted the coffee, but kept her distance. "You're not going to give up, are you?" "No." Arthur smiled, and for a moment she saw the boy she had known. "Remember when you broke your arm trying to climb on the school roof? You spent 3 days telling me to stop helping you carry your backpack. And you kept showing up every day," she murmured, a shadow of a smile touching her lips. "Still stubborn." They drank their coffee in silence, watching the city move. Eleanor was hyper-aware of his presence, of the subtle scent of expensive cologne, of the way he carefully maintained space between them so as not to pressure her. "Why did you disappear?" The question came out before she could contain herself. "I mean, I know you moved, but you just vanished. Not even a letter, not even a phone call. Arthur tensed beside her. He had rehearsed this conversation 1,000 times in his mind, but had never found the right words. It was complicated, he said finally. Complicated how? Eleanor turned to face him. Arthur, we were best friends. You promised you'd write every day. He ran his hand through his hair, a nervous gesture she remembered from childhood. My parents, they found out about us. Found out what? That we were friends? That I was in love with you. The words came out in a whisper. I was 15 years old and talked about you all the time. Mum thought it was cute at first, but then... Eleanor felt her heart race. Then what? Arthur hesitated, clearly struggling with painful memories. They hired a private investigator to find out more about your family. When they learned that your father was unemployed, that you lived in a rented house, they didn't think I was good enough for you, Eleanor completed, her voice filled with an old pain. It wasn't quite like that. Arthur turned to her, his eyes pleading for understanding. It was worse. They did things I only found out about years later. What kind of things? Arthur's silence was answer enough. Eleanor felt an old anger resurface, mixed with a painful understanding. You were a kid, she said softly. They controlled your life, but I should have fought. Arthur clenched his fists. I should have found a way to keep in touch. Instead, I let them convince me that it was for your own good, that you would be better off without the complications that my family could bring. And now? Eleanor asked. What's changed? Arthur looked at her intensely. Now I have enough power to make my own choices, and you need help. I don't want your pity. It's not pity. He leaned closer. It's debt. You saved me more times than you imagine when we were kids. Every time I came home after spending the day with you, I could face my parents' fights, their coldness. You gave me strength. Eleanor felt her defenses begin to crumble. Arthur, let me help you, he pleaded. Not as charity, as a friend, as someone who owes you much more than he can pay. She studied his face, looking for signs of lying or manipulation, but found only sincerity and a vulnerability that surprised her. The wounded boy she had known was still there, behind the success and the power. There's something you're not telling me, she said finally. About why your parents separated us. About what they did. Arthur looked away. Some secrets are too heavy to share. Heavier than 3 years living on the streets. He stared at her again, and for the first time she saw fear in his eyes. Not fear of her, but fear that she would judge him, that she would know the whole truth. If I tell you everything, he said slowly, you'll understand why I didn't deserve to find you again. Why part of me thinks you're better off away from me. Eleanor felt a chill. There were layers to that story that she hadn't even imagined, secrets that had the power to change everything between them. But here we are, she murmured. Here we are, he agreed. The sun was stronger now, warming the bench where they were sitting. Eleanor finished her coffee and allowed herself to relax slightly. It was strange how Arthur's presence made her feel safe after so long living in constant alert. Do you have a place to stay tonight? Arthur asked, trying to keep his tone casual. I have my survival strategies. That's not an answer, Eleanor sighed. There's a shelter that opens at 6 in the evening. If I get there early, I can get a spot. Arthur felt his chest tighten, imagining her competing for a place to sleep like a wounded animal. And if you don't get a spot? I improvise. The cruel simplicity of the answer hit him like a punch. While he slept in silk sheets in a 12-bedroom mansion, she improvised places to spend the night. Eleanor, he began, but she raised her hand. No, I know what you're going to say, and the answer is no. I'm not going to your house. I'm not going to accept a hotel. I'm not going to be your redemption project. Then accept having lunch with me, he insisted. That's all? A lunch between old friends. She studied him for a long moment. Why? Why is this so important to you? Arthur took a deep breath. Because in the last 25 years, every time I made an important decision, I thought, what would Eleanor do? That you were my moral compass, even absent. And now I need to find out if I'm still the man you taught me to be. The brutal honesty of the confession left Eleanor speechless. It was impossible to deny the sincerity in his voice, the vulnerability in his eyes. "Lunch," she said finally, "but in a simple place. And you stop showing up here every day." Arthur smiled, and for the first time since they reunited, the smile reached his eyes. "Deal." But as they walked towards a small diner nearby, neither of them knew that on the other side of the street, a freelance photographer had captured the whole scene. Intrigued by the presence of billionaire Arthur Sterling in such an improbable area of the city, in the company of a woman who clearly did not belong to his usual world. The diner Arthur chose was unassuming, a small establishment downtown where executives grabbed quick lunches. Eleanor felt out of place, even in her new clothes. Conscious of the curious glances she received next to Arthur. "Relax," he murmured, pulling out a chair for her. "No one here knows us." But Eleanor barely heard his words. The smell of the food hit her like a wave, making her stomach churn violently. After 3 years of eating only scraps and occasional donations, her body had forgotten what a complete meal was. "Are you okay?" Arthur asked, noticing how pale she had become. It's too much food," she admitted, looking at the menu. Everything seemed excessive, too luxurious for someone like her. Arthur ordered a simple soup and toast for her, intuitively knowing that anything heavier would be too much. While they waited, he tried to keep the conversation light, talking about changes in the city, avoiding topics that could embarrass her. "Remember when we used to steal apples from Mr. Henderson's orchard?" he asked, smiling. Eleanor smiled back, for the first time genuinely relaxing. "He always knew it was us, but he pretended he didn't see. I think he liked having kids around. His wife had died, and he was alone." Eleanor finished the sentence, a shadow passing over her eyes. "Sometimes I understand how he felt." Arthur reached out impulsively, covering her hand on the table. "You're not alone now." The touch was like an electric shock. Eleanor hadn't felt human affection in so long that she almost broke down right there. But instead of pulling away, she intertwined her fingers with his. "Arthur," she began, but her voice failed. That's when everything happened at once. The soup arrived, hot and aromatic. Eleanor took the first spoonful to her mouth and felt like the world was spinning. The taste, the texture, the very normalcy of the act of eating at a table with proper utensils. Everything combined into a whirlwind of emotions that she had suppressed for years. The tears came first, silent, running down her face as she tried to eat. Then came the memories. Family dinners, school lunches, the simple but dignified life she had lost. And finally came the collapse. "Sorry," she whispered, covering her face with her hands. "I can't." It's too much. But it wasn't just emotional. 3 years of malnutrition and stress had taken their toll. When she tried to get up, her legs gave way. Arthur caught her before she fell, pulling her against his chest. "Eleanor!" "Hey, stay with me." She was trembling violently, her breathing irregular. I can't stop crying," she murmured against his shoulder. Arthur didn't hesitate. He left money on the table and carried her out of the diner, ignoring the stares of the other customers. Eleanor was so exhausted that she could barely protest. "I'm going to take you to the hospital," he said, helping her into his car. "No," she managed to say. "Please, no. I don't want to be admitted. I don't want them to see me as crazy." Arthur looked at her, pale, trembling, clearly at the limit of her strength, and made a decision that would change everything. "Then I'm going to take you home." "My home?" "Arthur, I can't." "Yes, you can." His voice was firm, determined. "You need proper care, food, slowly, a safe place to rest. And I need to make sure you're okay." During the drive, Eleanor oscillated between consciousness and a kind of emotional stupor. Years of constant tension had finally found an outlet, and she could no longer keep her defenses up. Arthur's mansion in the Gold Coast was everything she had imagined. Elegant, imposing, a world completely different from her own. But he took her straight to a room on the ground floor, away from the main areas. "It used to be the housekeeper's room," he explained, helping her sit on the bed. "It has its own bathroom, it's private. You don't have to worry about anything." Eleanor looked around. The room was bigger than any place she had lived in recent years, impeccably clean, with a bed that felt like a cloud under her exhausted body. "Why are you doing this?" she asked, her voice almost inaudible. Arthur knelt beside the bed, taking her hand in his. "Because when we were kids, you held me every time I broke. Remember when my dad came home drunk? You stayed with me in the treehouse until he fell asleep. That was a long time ago, and you're still holding me," he whispered. Even without knowing it, there was something in his voice, an intensity that went beyond childhood friendship. Eleanor felt her heart race, but she was too weak to analyze what that meant. Arthur brought in a private doctor who confirmed severe malnutrition and extreme exhaustion, but nothing that couldn't be treated with proper care. He spent the whole night awake in the armchair in the room, watching her sleep, making sure she was breathing normally. In the morning, when Eleanor woke up, she found him still there, sleeping uncomfortably in the chair. In the daylight, she saw how vulnerable he looked, the worries etched on his face even in his sleep. That's when she realized that she had crossed an invisible line. It was no longer about charity or childhood friendship. Arthur Sterling, one of the most powerful men in the country, had slept in a chair to take care of her. He had risked his reputation by bringing her to his house, and she had let him. Arthur's phone rang, waking him up. It was Marcus, his assistant, and his voice was tense. "Arthur, we need to talk. Urgent. What is it?" "There are photos of you circulating with a woman. The gossip sites are speculating who she is, and, well, they're not pretty speculations." Arthur felt his stomach turn to ice. He looked at Eleanor, who had heard the conversation and was pale again. "They sent the photos to me," Marcus continued. "You guys at the diner, you carrying her to the car. The caption says, 'Arthur Sterling on secret date with mysterious homeless woman.'" The silence in the room was deafening. Eleanor got out of bed, her legs still shaky. "I need to leave," she said, looking for her shoes. "No." Arthur hung up the phone and approached her. "You're not leaving because of gossip. Arthur, your reputation, to hell with my reputation." He held her by the shoulders, forcing her to look at him. "You almost fainted yesterday. You need to recover, and you need to control the damage before it's too late." But it was already too late. At that moment, the phones of the two main gossip magazines in the country were ringing. The Sterling family had seen the photos, and Arthur's mother was already on her way to Chicago. The storm that was approaching would test not only Arthur and Eleanor's reunion, but how far he was willing to go to protect her. Helena Sterling arrived at her son's mansion like a hurricane in a Chanel suit. At 65 years old, she was still an imposing woman, with perfectly styled platinum hair and icy blue eyes like Arthur's. Her presence filled the entrance hall with an authority that demanded immediate obedience. "Where is she?" were her first words upon seeing her son. Arthur came down the stairs with a closed expression. He had spent the morning trying to protect Eleanor from the media circus that had formed outside. 3 television station vans were parked on the street, and his phone wouldn't stop ringing. "Good morning, Mother." "What an unexpected pleasure." "Don't get sarcastic with me, Arthur Sterling." Helena removed her leather gloves, a gesture he remembered from childhood that always preceded a severe scolding. "Do you have any idea what you've done? The scandal you've caused? I helped an old friend." "Old friend?" Helena laughed with contempt. "A beggar, Arthur. A woman who has lived on the streets for years. And you brought her into our house, into our family." "This is my house," Arthur retorted, but his mother was already going up the stairs. "And our family, our name, our reputation." She turned at the top of the stairs. "Where's her room?" Arthur intercepted her before she reached the hallway of rooms. "She's recovering. You're not going to disturb her." "Recovering from what?" "A life of bad choices." The casual cruelty in Helena's voice made Arthur clench his fists. "Mom, you don't know anything about what she's been through." "I know enough." Helena took a tablet out of her purse and showed it to him. The screen displayed a series of photos. Eleanor on the streets, sleeping in doorways, begging for money. "I hired the same investigator we used before." 3 years living as a bum, Arthur. 3 years. How did you get these photos so fast? Helena smiled coldly. "You didn't think we stopped monitoring her after you broke up, did you?" "I always knew where she was." The blood froze in Arthur's veins. "What? You didn't think that separation was accidental, did you? That we simply lost track of her when we moved?" Helena put the tablet away. We've maintained discreet surveillance over Eleanor Campos for 25 years. Arthur felt the world spin. Why? Because I know my son. I knew that one day you would try to find her. And when you did, I needed to be prepared. The door to Eleanor's room opened at that moment. She appeared in the hallway, wearing a robe that Arthur had left for her, but still fragile and pale. She had woken up to the raised voices. "Arthur, is everything okay?" Helena turned to study Eleanor, and Arthur saw the exact moment when his mother recognized her. Not as the beggar in the photos, but as the 15-year-old girl who had infatuated his son. "Hello, Eleanor," Helena said with a dangerously soft voice. "You've grown up." Eleanor descended a few steps, instinctively positioning herself beside Arthur. "Mrs. Sterling, so you remember me? Good." Helena descended the stairs slowly, like a predator circling its prey. "It means you also remember our last conversation." Arthur looked between the two women, confused. "What conversation?" Eleanor paled even more. "Arthur, oh, you never told him." Helena smiled with cruel satisfaction. "How interesting. Told me what?" Arthur demanded. Helena approached Eleanor. "Tell him about the visit I made to your house 3 days before we moved to London. Tell him about the proposal I made." Eleanor's legs weakened, and Arthur held her up. "What is she talking about?" Eleanor looked at Helena with fear. "She went to my house when you were traveling with your father." "And?" Helena answered for her. "And I offered her $100,000 to stay away from my son, to never try to contact him again." The silence that followed was deafening. Arthur looked at Eleanor, searching for denial in her eyes, but found only guilt and shame. "Eleanor," his voice was hoarse, "say it isn't true." "She accepted," Helena continued, relentless. "Took the money and signed a non-disclosure agreement. Promised she would never reveal what happened between you." "It wasn't like that," Eleanor whispered, tears running down her face. "My mother was sick. We needed the money for treatment. You chose," Helena cut in. "And now you're here, 25 years later, trying to take advantage of my son's success." Arthur released Eleanor and stepped back, as if she had hurt him physically. "You lied to me. Yesterday when I asked why we lost contact, I couldn't tell you. You wouldn't understand." "Understand what? That you sold me for $100,000? It wasn't like that," Eleanor shouted. "I was 15 years old. My mother was dying, and your mother said that if I really loved you, I would stay away because you deserved more than a poor girl." Helena clapped slowly. "Oh, how touching. But let's get to the facts, darling. You took the money, disappeared from his life, and now you come back just when he's become a billionaire. What a coincidence." Arthur ran his hands through his hair, trying to process the information. Everything he had believed about the past was collapsing. "And there's more," Helena continued, taking another document out of her purse. "The contract she signed included a penalty clause. If she tried to contact you again, she would have to return the money adjusted for inflation." Arthur looked at the paper. The current value of the debt was astronomical, more than $2 million. "Technically," Helena smiled, "she is committing breach of contract right now. I can sue her for libel, defamation, and demand full payment of the debt." Eleanor fell sitting on the stairs, finally understanding the trap. Eleanor Sterling had not only destroyed her past with Arthur, she had created a legal prison that would keep her away from him forever. "Unless," Helena continued, "she leaves my son's life voluntarily. Today." Arthur's phone rang. It was Marcus again. "Don't answer it," Helena said. "Let me guess. More photos leaked. Maybe even a video of her entering your house last night." Arthur looked at his mother with growing horror. "You orchestrated all of this. I protected our interests. And I will continue to protect them." Helena headed for the door. "You have until the end of the day to resolve this discreetly. After that, things get complicated." When Helena left, Arthur and Eleanor were alone in the hall, the weight of the revealed secrets hanging between them like a toxic cloud. "Arthur," Eleanor began, but he raised his hand. "I need time to process this. Please let me explain." "Explain what?" "That everything we lived, everything I felt, was bought and paid for." His voice was cold, distant. "That you accepted money to forget me?" I never forgot you. Eleanor stood up desperate. Not a day went by without me thinking about you. But you accepted the money to save my mother, and you never tried to tell me the truth. Eleanor had no answer for that. The truth was that even after her mother's death, even when the money had run out, she had never tried to find Arthur. First out of pride, then out of shame, and finally because she was too lost to believe that she deserved his love. Arthur's phone rang again. This time he answered. Arthur, Marcus spoke quickly. We have a bigger problem. Someone leaked photos of her at the shelter, talking to social workers. The sites are speculating that she has psychiatric problems. And there's more. They found records of her being arrested for vagrancy last year. Arthur closed his eyes. Have them cancel all my appointments this week. Arthur, the meeting with the Japanese investors. Cancel everything. When he hung up, he found Eleanor watching him with a mixture of love and despair. I'm going to leave, she said simply. Your mother is right. Adieu. I've only brought trouble into your life. No. Arthur, I said no. He approached her, his expression determined. My mother may have bought your silence 25 years ago, but she's not going to buy mine now. You don't understand. She can destroy me completely. Arthur held her face in his hands. Then we'll just have to be smarter than her. But neither of them knew that. At that moment, Helena Sterling was in her private office, making a call to Chet Huntington, the most feared gossip columnist in the country. Chet, Helena Sterling, I have a story for you. A story that will make headlines for weeks. The war had only just begun. The bomb exploded on Thursday morning. Eleanor woke up to Arthur shaking her gently. Don't look, he said, but his voice was defeated. Please don't look. But it was impossible not to see. Her phone, which Arthur had given her the day before for emergencies, was flooded with notifications. The first headline she saw made her stop breathing. Homeless hoax, billionaire scammed by fake romance, exclusive photos and contracts. With trembling hands, she opened the link. Chet Huntington's article was devastating. Not only did it expose her past on the streets with cruel and detailed photos, but it revealed the contract signed with Helena Sterling 25 years ago. There were copies of the documents, bank statements, everything. But the worst was at the end of the article, a recording. This recording was made yesterday by an anonymous source in the Sterling mansion, the caption read. It was her own voice, distorted but recognizable. He never forgot the girl I was. It's easy to manipulate that nostalgia. Powerful men are all the same, lonely and needy. Eleanor felt the world collapse. Arthur, I never said that. I know, he replied, but there was something in his eyes that terrified her. Doubt, just a sliver, but it was there. His phone rang. It was his lawyer. Arthur, I need to see you urgently. Your shareholders are in a panic. Sterling Tech stock is down 15% this morning alone. When he hung up, Arthur avoided her gaze. The Japanese investors canceled the deal. $200 million gone down the drain. Eleanor felt nauseous. Because of me. It's not your fault. It's my mother's psychological warfare. But at that moment, Marcus arrived running, with a look of total panic. Arthur, there's more. Much more. He showed the tablet. Helena gave a live interview to 3 networks. She's saying that Eleanor approached her 6 months ago, threatening to expose family secrets if she didn't receive money. The screen showed Helena Sterling sitting elegantly in a television studio, perfectly calculated tears running down her face. My son has too generous a heart, she was saying to the presenter. This woman took advantage of a childhood friendship to manipulate him emotionally. She blackmailed him with false memories, invented a romance that never existed. But the photos show Arthur taking care of her, the presenter insisted, because she convinced him that she was sick, that she needed help. Arthur can't see evil in people. It's his greatest quality and his greatest weakness. Eleanor couldn't watch anymore. The version of the story that Helena told was so well constructed, so convincing, that for a moment she herself almost believed it. Arthur's phone rang again. It was the chairman of the board of directors of Sterling Tech. Arthur, emergency meeting in 2 hours. The shareholders are considering a vote of no confidence. When he hung up, the silence in the room was deafening. You're going to lose everything, Eleanor whispered. The company I built, yes, probably. Arthur. She approached him, but Arthur stepped back. I need you to be completely honest with me, he said, his voice too controlled. Did you really never try to find me in all these years? Not even once? The question hit her like a slap. What? Because my mother has evidence that you were seen near the Sterling Tech offices at least 3 times in the last 2 years. Eleanor felt the ground disappear beneath her feet. It was true. She had passed by the building a few times when she was on the streets downtown, always wondering if she would have the courage to go up. But she had never tried to contact him. I passed by the building a few times, she admitted. But I never went up. I never tried to talk to you. Why didn't you tell me this? Because I knew how it would sound. Arthur ran his hands through his hair, frustrated. Eleanor, I need to know if there's anything at all that you haven't told me. Because if my mother finds out later, there's nothing else, she shouted. Arthur, do you really think I would be capable of blackmailing you? He looked at her for a long moment. I don't know what to think anymore. The words were like a stab wound. Eleanor saw everything they had rebuilt in recent days disintegrating before her eyes. At that moment, Marcus returned running. Arthur, we have a bigger problem. Chet Huntington has a new source. Someone close to you is leaking information in real time. Who? We don't know, but this person has access to the house. Knows exactly what you talk about, where you are. Paranoia set in like a virus. Arthur looked at Eleanor with an expression she didn't recognize. Suspicion, fear, confusion. His phone rang once more. It was Helena. Arthur, darling, are you watching the news? What do you want, Mom? I want to protect you. And I have a final offer. Her voice was sweet, dangerous. If Eleanor leaves your life now, publicly, admitting that she invented everything, I can make this scandal disappear. I have enough influence for that. And if she doesn't leave, then things will get much worse. I have evidence that she has a history of mental instability, psychiatric hospitalizations, suicide attempts. I can make her life a living hell, Arthur. Arthur hung up and looked at Eleanor. She said you've been hospitalized before, that you attempted suicide. Eleanor closed her eyes. It was the last secret, the most painful. It was after the money ran out, she whispered. When my mother died and I lost everything, I spent 3 months in a public clinic. Why didn't you tell me? Because I knew you were going to look at me the way you're looking now. Like I was too broken to be fixed. Arthur moved away from her, clearly struggling with conflicting feelings. Eleanor saw the exact moment when he began to doubt everything. Her, them, the very reality of what they felt for each other. Maybe my mother is right, he said finally. Maybe you need professional help. The words were the final blow. Eleanor felt something die inside her. Okay, she said with a chilling calm. I'm going to leave, Eleanor. No, you're right. Your mother is right. They've only brought destruction to your life. She began to gather the few things she had. I'll give the interview she wants. I'll admit that I made everything up. You don't have to do that. Eleanor turned to him, and Arthur saw that something had broken irreparably in her eyes. Yes, I do. Because you don't trust me anymore. And without trust, there's nothing. She put on the old clothes she had worn when she arrived there, leaving the ones Arthur had given her. At the door, she turned one last time. For the record, she said, her voice as cold as ice, I never lied about loving you. That was the only truth that always remained intact. Arthur stood still as she left, part of him wanting to run after her, part of him relieved to see the problem resolve itself. 2 hours later, Eleanor was in Chet Huntington's television studio. Is it true that you invented the romance with Arthur Sterling? He asked, the cameras rolling live. Eleanor looked directly into the lens, imagining Arthur watching. Yes, she lied, feeling pieces of her own soul shattering. I made everything up. Arthur Sterling is a good man who was manipulated by someone desperate. He didn't deserve this. And the money? Were you trying to extort him? I was confused, sick. I need medical treatment. When the interview ended, Eleanor left the studio knowing that she had destroyed any chance of happiness she might have had. But Arthur was safe now. His company was safe. His reputation would be restored, and she would return to the streets where she always belonged. At the Sterling mansion, Arthur watched the interview with a broken heart, even knowing that every word was a lie told to protect him. But it was too late to go back. The distance between them now seemed insurmountable, built of secrets, lies, and the cruel manipulation of Helena Sterling. Everything was lost. Eleanor spent the first night after the interview under the awning of the subway station, as if the last few days at Arthur's mansion had been just a cruel dream. But this time it was different. The pain she felt was not just physical, it was the agony of someone who had given up on herself. For 3 days, she wandered the streets like a ghost. People recognized her from the news and whispered, pointed. Some threw coins with pity, others cursed her, calling her an opportunist. She accepted everything with morbid indifference. It was on the morning of the 4th day that everything changed. Eleanor was sitting on the same park bench where Arthur had found her when a young man approached. It was Marcus, Arthur's assistant, but she only recognized him when he spoke. "Eleanor, can I sit down?" She looked at him distrustfully. "If your boss sent you here, Arthur doesn't know I'm here." Marcus sat down next to her, visibly nervous. "In fact, he'd fire me if he knew. Then why did you come?" Marcus hesitated, then took an envelope from the inside pocket of his jacket. "Because I've worked for Arthur for 3 years. I know him better than anyone. And in the last few days, I've seen a man destroying himself from the inside out. He's better off without me." "Is he?" Marcus laughed bitterly. "He doesn't sleep, he doesn't eat, he doesn't leave the office. He cancelled all personal appointments. The company is recovering, yes, but Arthur..." He shook his head. "Eleanor, he's dying inside. And what does that have to do with me?" Marcus handed her the envelope. "I found this yesterday by chance. I was organizing the old files in the office when I found a folder with your name on it." Eleanor opened the envelope with trembling hands. Inside were copies of documents, emails, bank statements. She began to read and felt the world spin. They were communications between Helena Sterling and Chet Huntington, dated weeks before her reunion with Arthur. Emails planning a discredit campaign if Arthur tried to find her. There were substantial payments for information services and a list of points of vulnerability about Eleanor. "Helena knew you were going to meet," Marcus explained. "She had been prepared for months." Eleanor continued reading, the horror growing with each line. There were copies of emails to psychiatric clinics requesting confirmation of treatments that had never happened, payments to falsify medical records. She invented my psychiatric history. And worse, she created a complete plan to destroy any chance of you being together. Marcus pointed to a specific document. "Look at the date of this email." It was a message to an audio specialist dated 2 weeks earlier. The subject was, "Creation of convincing recording, female voice." Eleanor felt the anger explode in her chest like lava. "The recording that incriminated me, it was fabricated. Helena hired a specialist in audio manipulation. They took snippets of your voice from security videos of the shelter and created phrases you never said." Eleanor's hands trembled as she held the documents. 3 days of self-destruction, of believing that she deserved all the bad things that had happened, and it had all been an elaborate lie. "Why are you showing me this?" she asked, her voice hoarse. "Because Arthur needs to know the truth. But it can't come from me. Helena would find out and destroy me too. It needs to come from you. He won't listen to me." "Not after the interview." Marcus stood up. "Then you're going to have to find a way to make him listen." When Marcus walked away, Eleanor was alone with the documents, feeling something she hadn't felt in years: justified anger. Helena Sterling had orchestrated not only their separation 25 years ago, but had spent decades preparing to prevent any reunion. For the first time in days, Eleanor stood up from the bench with purpose. She used a computer at the public library to research more about Helena Sterling. She discovered a network of influence that stretched for decades: politicians, journalists, judges, all on her payroll in one way or another. But she also discovered something else. Helena had done this before. There were other women, other lives destroyed to maintain the purity of the Sterling family. A secretary who had been fired and defamed after Arthur showed interest in her. A college classmate who had been transferred to another country after a chance encounter with him. Helena Sterling was a serial predator, destroying any threat to her control over her son. Eleanor spent hours copying information, building a dossier. When she left the library, she had in her hands enough evidence to expose not only the lies about her, but Helena's entire pattern of manipulation. But she knew she needed more than evidence. She needed a platform, someone with enough courage to face the power of the Sterlings. That's when she remembered Barbara Walters. Barbara was an investigative journalist who had been fired from 3 jobs for refusing to cover up scandals of powerful people. Now she had an independent YouTube channel and a reputation for incorruptibility. Eleanor met Barbara at a coffee shop downtown the following night. The journalist was a 40-something woman with frizzy, graying hair, intelligent eyes that seemed to see through people. "You're the woman from the interview," Barbara said when Eleanor introduced herself. "The one who confessed to inventing the romance with Arthur Sterling. I lied in that interview." Eleanor placed the dossier on the table. "And I have proof that I was forced to lie." Barbara examined the documents for over an hour, asking pointed questions, checking dates and signatures. Her expression grew more serious with each page. "This is explosive," she said finally. "If it's true, Helena Sterling is guilty of forgery, defamation, blackmail, and media manipulation. It's true." "Every word." Barbara studied her intensely. "Why should I believe you? After the interview where you admitted to lying?" Eleanor took a deep breath. "Because I'm willing to bet everything on this. My freedom, my life, everything. Helena Sterling destroyed me once 25 years ago, and she just did it again. But this time I'm not going to run. And Arthur Sterling, does he know you're doing this?" "No, and he'll probably hate me for it initially. But I'd rather he hate me knowing the truth than love me believing a lie." Barbara closed the dossier. "I need 48 hours to verify this information independently. If everything checks out, yes, then we go to war against one of the most powerful families in the country." Barbara smiled, and Eleanor saw in that smile the hunger of a journalist who had found the story of her life. "I hope you're prepared for the consequences." Eleanor thought of Arthur, probably alone in his mansion, believing that she had betrayed him. She thought of the 3 years of misery on the streets, the humiliations, the hopelessness. "I am," she said with a determination she hadn't felt in decades. "I'm prepared for everything." Over the next 48 hours, Barbara verified every document, every date, every signature. She confirmed the payments, found other victims willing to speak, discovered Helena's web of corruption. At the end of the 2nd day, she called Eleanor. "We're going on air tomorrow night. Prime time." And Eleanor, "Yes? Get ready, because when this blows up, there's no turning back." Eleanor hung up the phone and looked at the fogged mirror in the public restroom where she had gotten ready. For the first time in years, she recognized the woman she saw reflected. Not the destroyed beggar, not the resigned victim. It was Eleanor Campos, the girl who at 10 years old had faced bullies to defend Arthur. The teenager who had worked to help with the household income. The woman who had survived 3 years on the streets without completely losing her dignity. She had returned, and this time Helena Sterling would be the one who paid the price. The stage was set for the final confrontation. Barbara Walters' report aired on a Thursday at 9 o'clock in the evening, prime time. Arthur was in his office, trying to focus on financial reports when Marcus ran in. "Arthur, you need to see this, now." On the screen, Barbara methodically presented each piece of evidence. The emails between Helena and Chet Huntington, the payments to falsify documents, the fabricated recordings, the pattern of systematic destruction of any woman who got close to Arthur. Arthur felt the blood run cold when he saw the copies of the original contracts, not just the one Eleanor had signed, but dozens of others. Silence agreements, bribes, blackmail. 25 years of manipulation documented in cruel detail. My God, he whispered, dropping the papers he was holding. But it was when Barbara brought Eleanor to the screen that Arthur stopped breathing. She was different. Her hair clean and styled, simple but dignified clothes, and in her eyes a determination that he hadn't seen in decades. It was the Eleanor he had known in childhood, courageous, principled, willing to fight for what was right. Eleanor, Barbara asked, why did you decide to expose this truth, knowing that you could face retaliation? Because 25 years ago, I was a scared teenager who accepted money to stay away from the man I loved, Eleanor replied, looking directly at the camera. Because 3 days ago, I lied in a national interview to protect him from the consequences of loving me. And because it's time to stop letting Helena Sterling decide who deserves to be happy and who doesn't. Arthur stood up abruptly, knocking over the chair. Marcus, where is she? I don't know, but Arthur, find her, now. On television, Barbara continued the systematic devastation of Helena Sterling. She showed documents proving that she had sabotaged Arthur's own companies when he demonstrated too much independence. She revealed bribes to politicians, manipulation of bids, use of the family's charitable foundation for money laundering. Arthur's phone rang. It was Helena. Arthur, darling, don't believe these absurd lies. 25 years, Arthur cut in, his voice dangerously low. 25 years you've controlled my life, destroyed my happiness, and I didn't even suspect it. I protected you. That woman loved me enough to sacrifice herself twice for me. You tortured her for the crime of having too big a heart. Arthur took a deep breath. It's over, Mom. Your whole reign of lies is over. You don't understand the consequences. I understand perfectly. You're going to stay away from my life completely. You're going to return every penny you stole from innocent people. And if you try to harm Eleanor again, I'll personally make sure you spend the rest of your life in prison. Arthur hung up and turned to Marcus. Did you manage to locate Eleanor? She's at Barbara's studio, but Arthur, there's more. The police are already on their way to your mother's house. They have search warrants. When Arthur arrived at the studio, the report was ending. Eleanor was leaving the building when she saw him standing next to the car, and for a moment they just looked at each other across the busy street. She crossed slowly as if afraid that he would disappear. When she got close, Arthur saw that she had cried. Her eyes were red but determined. Did you watch? She asked. I watched. Arthur took a step towards her. Eleanor, No, she raised her hand. Let me speak first, because I need you to know that I understand if you can't forgive me. I understand if it's too late. Eleanor, I lied to you. Even if it was to protect you, I broke your trust. And I should have been stronger 25 years ago. I should have found a way to stay with you without accepting your mother's money. Arthur came closer until he was just inches from her. You were 15 years old. Your mother was dying. You did what any daughter would do. But I never tried to find you afterwards. Even when the money ran out, because you were ashamed, because you thought you didn't deserve forgiveness. Arthur touched her face gently. I know you, Eleanor. I know your heart. I always have. Arthur, your company, your reputation. I destroyed everything. You saved everything. He smiled, and for the first time in days, the smile reached his eyes. Saved me from living a lie for the rest of my life. Saved me from my own mother. And now? What happens now? Arthur looked around. They were standing on the sidewalk, surrounded by the chaos of the city, but it could have been just the two of them in the whole world. Now, he said, I do what I should have done 25 years ago. He knelt right there on the dirty Chicago sidewalk and took a ring from his pocket. It wasn't the expensive ring he could buy, but a simple silver ring that had belonged to his grandmother. Eleanor Campos, he said, his voice choked. Will you marry me? Not the billionaire, not the CEO, but me. The boy who still cries when he watches a sad movie and who still needs you to be brave. Eleanor looked at him, disheveled hair, wrinkled suit, eyes shining with tears, and saw not the powerful man he had become, but the boy who had been her best friend, her first love, her soulmate. "Yes," she whispered, then shouted, "Yes!" Arthur stood up and kissed her right there, while passers-by stopped to applaud, and some recognized the couple from the news. But they didn't even notice. They were lost in each other, finally free from the lies and manipulations that had separated them. 6 months later, Helena Sterling was serving time for forgery and racketeering. Sterling Tech had fully recovered, with Arthur taking full control and implementing real social programs, not just for image washing. The wedding was simple, in a small church in the neighborhood where Eleanor had grown up. She wore Arthur's grandmother's dress. He wore Eleanor's grandfather's suit he had worn at his own wedding. The only witnesses were Marcus, Barbara Walters, and some children from the social project that Eleanor had begun to coordinate. During the ceremony, when the priest asked if they had anything to declare to each other, Arthur took Eleanor's hands. "I promise," he said, "that I will never let anyone separate us again. That I will protect you not by hiding you from the world, but by facing the world by your side." Eleanor smiled through her tears. "And I promise that I will never lie again to protect you. That I will trust in us, in our love, even when everything seems impossible." When they kissed as husband and wife, there were no paparazzi flashes or illustrious guests. There were just two hearts that had found their way back to each other, proving that true love can survive any storm, overcome any obstacle, and that sometimes the most beautiful stories begin in the most unlikely places. 3 years later, while watching Arthur play in the garden with their 2-year-old daughter, Eleanor touched her belly, where their second baby was growing, and smiled. There were days when she still didn't believe that this life was real, that she had emerged from the ashes of so much suffering to find a happiness she hadn't even dared to dream of. "What are you thinking about?" Arthur asked, sitting next to her on the porch swing. "About how strange it is," she replied, "that everything we lived through, all the pain, was necessary to get us here." Arthur pulled her closer. It wasn't in vain. Nothing was in vain. And so, under the starry Chicago sky, surrounded by the laughter of their daughter and the promise of new beginnings, Arthur and Eleanor finally found their happy ending. Not the perfect ending of fairy tales, but the real and true ending of those who fought for the right to love and won.